Welcome to the Rise2Shine Podcast with Noelle Custis, where we ignite the spark to discover your favorite self. It is time to get real, ladies. Hello, and welcome to the Rise2Shine Podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Custis, and we are officially in season 2. And I want to start by saying this episode feels a little different for me. It feels heavier and a little more tender, but also really necessary. This may actually be, I'm thinking about it, and I think it may actually be my most raw episode yet. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous to record it, not because I don't believe in being real, but because this one required me to slow down and really ask myself why I wanted to share it. And after what I've recently gone through, I knew honestly that I just had to press play anyway. I knew it. But before I go any further, I want to gently set the tone for today, because this episode is not going to be about fixing anything. Not going to be about fixing anything. It's not medical advice. It's not a how-to, and it's not meant to overwhelm you. This is simply me just telling you the truth without abandoning myself in the process. One of the reasons I love podcasting so much and why this space means so much to me is because it allows for nuance. It allows for pauses. It allows for context. Social media just isn't always the place to unpack my real life, especially when it is still tender and I'm kind of just really still going through it. And yet this podcast space, I guess, this home that I've created, it feels like a solid, grounded community, and it feels like my safe space. Just this safe room. Even though I'm technically just looking through a screen, it doesn't feel weird to say that I actually feel held here. And I know for some of you, you're like, what? I know it's weird, but I just want to say thank you truly for being here. And what I want to talk about today is fear, specifically around our health as women. I want to talk about the triggers, the mind games, the spirals, the shame that shows up when we think we should be, and I'm putting this in quotes, stronger, when we're supposed to be more regulated, more evolved than this. How many of you are with me going, oh, there's so much shame in this sometimes? And if I'm being really, really honest, part of why this episode is hard is because there has been a quiet part of me that has felt like an imposter lately. Not because I haven't been real with you, but because there's been, I don't know, a little gap between how I show up and what I've been navigating lately in my own life behind the scenes. And I've shared pieces of it. I've been honest in ways that have felt appropriate for the spaces that I'm in, but I also believe deeply that not every moment of our personal life always belongs on display. And still, carrying these things quietly can feel really heavy. And there's this unspoken pressure we carry as women to hold it all together, to not worry people, to not burden anyone, to not sound dramatic or whiny, to not invite opinions we didn't ask for, because once you open the door, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has, or lots of people have, a judgment. And then there's that voice that says, you should know better. You teach this. You've done the work. You help other women through this as a women's mentor, life coach, right? But here is the truth that I'm learning in real time. Self-awareness does not make you immune to fear. If anything, sometimes it makes you more sensitive to it. I'm finding that out very quickly. So, knowing better doesn't mean that that always translates to feeling safe in your body. I want to say that. And when fear shows up through your health, it can feel especially destabilizing because it hits our sense of control. It affects the way we show up, our responsibility to everyone else. I also want to say this out loud because I know someone listening needs to hear this. Fear around health is not a weakness. I'm speaking to myself as well. It's the nervous system trying to protect you in a body that suddenly feels unpredictable. There is so much programming that we've been subjected to as women. Be strong, be resilient, be grateful, don't complain, push through, keep going. And when your body waves this big red flag or your nervous system starts to go into overdrive, the shame creeps in really, really fast. Why am I spiraling? Why can't I just calm down? These were all the things that I was saying to myself over and over again. Why isn't what I know translating into peace? Why is this happening to me? And today I want to talk about that disconnect, about what happens when logic and lived experience does not line up. I want to talk about that. When the body doesn't feel safe, even when the mind is trying to reassure it. And I want to say this clearly before we go any further. This episode is not about me having it all figured out. I promise you. It's about me telling the truth to you while I am in the middle of it. So if at any time it feels a little tender, please know you can pause this. You can come back to it. Everybody has their own experiences, and I want to honor that. But this conversation is really meant to be received gently because I want you to know that you're not alone in this. I want you to know that you're not weak for feeling the way that you feel. I am so tired of allowing myself to feel that way. So I'm going to take a breath if you want to take a breath with me, and then we'll just keep going. Before I share all of the things that I'm wanting to share and that are on my heart, I think it's important that I share a little bit of my story, not all the details, not everything, but enough context so this makes sense because this didn't come out of nowhere, obviously. It never does. When I really look back, I've had health issues for as long as I can remember. Truly, this is not new for me. My mom has actually even said to me many times that I've had stomach issues since I was a child. And not just tummy aches, you guys. I'm talking about the anxiety in the body kind of issues. We just didn't know it back then. Fear, I really believe, lived in me very early on. And now, with more awareness, I can see how much of that was shaped by early childhood trauma. Losing my dad at a young age, and not just losing him, but losing him by being struck by lightning. It was very shocking as a child. No one even believed me when I said that. Then there was navigating a new blended family when my mom got remarried. There was a lot of dysfunction and there was a lot of grief. There was a lot of change. And I don't want to get really far into that today, but it matters. And my mom even tells me a story that still gets to me that after my dad died, I was 8 years old, by the way, I was so afraid to go home that I once even, well, she says it was more than once, tried to jump out of the car because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to go home because I was so terrified. She said, I used to say, now please don't call me crazy, but she said that I used to say that I would see spirits, that I would see ghosts. And I carried so much fear in my little body. And as I look back and as we talk about these things, all the signs were there. There was anxiety, there was hypervigilance, there was a nervous system that did not feel safe at all. And they just weren't diagnosing this stuff back then. And I want to say this really lovingly and beautifully because my mom was amazing. She did everything she could to support me. I actually started counseling before people ever thought that it was first of all, people didn't even know what that meant to go to therapy, to counseling. I mean, this was back in the early 80s. And honestly, therapy is cool now, but it was not cool then. It was very again, it was kind of embarrassing. I didn't really talk about it to people. But I also want to share that as I got older, these symptoms didn't disappear, they just changed forms. As a young adult, I had massive, and when I say massive, I'm talking massive gut issues. Looking back now, I can see it just so crystal clear. Stress continued to take over my body, literally. But at the time, again, no one was talking about cortisol. No one was talking about the nervous system. No one was talking about somatic work or emotional regulation. No, 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 no. That was not being talked about. I didn't know how to process emotions through my body. I didn't know how to discharge stress. I just knew that something felt really off and really wrong. And there were countless times that I would convince myself that I was dying. Every ache, every pain, I would go in, I would get tested, I would walk out with no answers. Everything was always undecided, inconclusive, everything looks fine. And I just have to say again, because this matters, I was not a hypochondriac. I wasn't making things up. I just had these weird, unexplained health issues that didn't fit neatly into a box. And throughout my life, it all came in waves, seasons where things felt very manageable, seasons where fear would take over. And at one point, I even started taking natural supplements, fruits and vegetables in a capsule form. For those of you who have been around for a long time, you know what I'm talking about. And I am going to tell you, people literally thought I was insane. Food as medicine was barely entering the conversation. And even then, people didn't believe in it. Not really. I laugh now because I feel like, wow, I was really ahead of the curve back then without even realizing it. And honestly, I want to hug that version of myself. I had so much compassion for her, but sometimes I didn't have any compassion at all. There were seasons that I completely gave up on myself. But then there was also those seasons where I was my biggest cheerleader. And then perimenopause hits. Ooh, that's a fun one, isn't it? Can we all just scream from the rooftops for just 1 second, just 1 minute, please? Because no one prepared us for this. The hormone shifts, the way symptoms just get amplified, the way anxiety even feels louder, it feels faster, it even affects us physically more often. Your body starts to react before your mind even knows what in the world is going on. And layered on top of all that is something else that shaped me deeply as a woman. Growing up, we all heard this statistic. Now I want you to just think about this. 1 in 3 women will get breast cancer. 1 in 3. I cannot tell you how many times I sat in a room full of women and counted, literally counted, who would it be? Which one of us? Because you guys, that programming, it runs so deep. And I'm going to be honest, the C word, it still frightens me the most. I think it always will. And then there is this other layer, the stories we hear. This is just, oh, you guys, this is why it is so important for me to be vulnerable here because the stories we hear of the women who ignored their symptoms, who didn't want to overreact, who didn't want to look foolish, who didn't want to bother anyone because God forbid we do that. And then later it turned out to be something super serious. So it just sometimes feels like we are in this impossible place. Don't overreact. Don't ignore it. Trust your body, but don't be dramatic. Advocate for yourself, but don't be annoying. It's exhausting. It is exhausting. And this is what brings me to the last few years, and especially in the last 4 weeks, where all of this history, all of this conditioning, all of this fear came rushing back to the surface. And I know it's not because I'm weak. I know it's not because I haven't done the work. It's because my body has a memory. So that's why I want to talk about what's actually happening when fear hijacks the system. So, why that logical brain doesn't always save us. Why so many women experience this exact spiral, even when their life looks fine on the outside. So, if this story feels familiar, stay with me. Because again, I'm going to keep repeating this. You're not alone in this. This is why I'm pressing record. And it feels like the right time to say this. Things have been super intense lately, not just in my body, but in my life. There have been family health scares. There's been friends that have been navigating disease, illnesses, loss, death. And I'm going to say that quiet accumulation of grief and worry that doesn't always get named, but it absolutely gets stored into our body. And somewhere along the way, I started to feel this like really unsettling sense of losing control of myself. Like I was constantly asking, what is happening to my body? I didn't even like talking to my husband about it. Who is my person? Who is the person that I literally share 99.9% of everything with? And in recent months, I started gaining weight rapidly, even though my eating patterns for the most part stayed the same. Like it wasn't like I went through this massive thing outside of the holidays, of course, but even then, not crazy. And honestly, a lot of my habits had improved in a lot of ways. But if you've ever said that out loud, you know what happens next. People don't believe you. And there's been lots of gut issues that have started flaring up again. There's been like bloating and all these weird pains and just that really familiar feeling of my body being loud and confusing. And that's when the mind games kicked in. So a few years ago, again, for those of you that don't know, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I don't really talk about it a ton. And I'm just going to say that the quiet part that needs to be said out loud, because you might even be thinking of it right now, is that, oh yeah, fibromyalgia, that's the thing that they say when they can't pinpoint what's actually wrong with you. Trust me, I have gone down every single rabbit hole on this. Is it real? Is it autoimmune? Is it trauma stored in the body? Is it my mind making up this pain? Because you hear it all. And here's what I know for sure. I don't know what it is exactly, but I will tell you that the pain is real. Whether people argue about the label or not, the experience is real. And living in that gray area where some experts say yes and others say no is also exhausting. And it also messes with your head. It makes you question yourself. It makes you feel like you're crazy. So here I am again, symptoms showing up, my body feeling unfamiliar, and now hormones are entering into the conversation. And again, don't get me started on that because everyone has an opinion about hormones. What to take, what not to take, what's dangerous, what's life changing, who's right, who's wrong, more overwhelm. There is so much noise that I feel like we start to lose trust in our own internal signal. We start wondering if we are imagining things, if we're being dramatic, if we're missing something serious, and then something new happens. About 4 weeks ago, I start feeling pain in my breast, and not just for a day or two, for over a month. So now add everything else in that I've already shared, the history and the programming and the 1 in 3 statistic, all the fear. And I think I'm going to be proactive about this, which sometimes that's even heavy. That's even hard, right? Because we like to stay in denial. We're afraid of what we're going to find out. But I call the doctor on a Monday morning and I literally cannot get in for months. So I do the next best thing and I schedule a mammogram. I get the blood work, and the waiting period is paralyzing because once you schedule it, then all the thoughts creep in again. What are they going to find? And then here's the other part that a lot of people don't talk about is you still have to show up for life. You still have to function. You have to work, you have to care, you have to lead, be present. Oh, and you got to smile. You got to hold it all together. You don't just get to fall apart just because your nervous system is literally like screaming at you. So you start to compartmentalize and you start to tell yourself, stay calm. You try not to spiral. That's another compartment. And your body's already there though. And this is where fear stops being theoretical and becomes physical. This is where the logic no longer soothes you. This is where all the reassurance, it just isn't landing. My husband was saying beautiful things to me. I even opened up to my mom. She was being so caring, opened up to a few friends. But again, I was always like, just told them enough because I didn't want all the judgment. I didn't want all the opinions. And then it just still didn't feel safe. It just didn't land. And I'm going to say to you, because I need to say it to myself, there's nothing wrong with us if our body reacts before our minds catch up to it. And there's nothing weak in us about feeling afraid when your health feels uncertain. And I want to kind of explain a little bit of why this happens, not from a fix yourself place, but from a biological one, because when you understand what's happening inside your body, it can soften the shame a little bit. Because the shame is oftentimes what actually keeps us stuck. So if you're listening to this and quietly nodding, please know this, you're not crazy. You're not making it up and you're not failing because you can't think your way out of fear. So let's talk about what's really going on under the surface. So this is the part where I want to slow down a bit because understanding this changed everything for me. When we're afraid, especially around our health, we tend to think something is wrong with our mindset. If we were to just look at it differently, if we just calmed down or stayed positive, everything would settle. I'm sure many of you have felt that way because I hear a lot of women talking about that. And I even work on mindset in my practice as well. But that is not exactly how the body works. And here is what's important to know. And again, I'm not an expert, but through the work that I've done, I do know that your body's not waiting for your mind to decide if it's safe. Your body actually decides this first. We often think that the brain is in charge of everything. That's what I was taught, anyways. But there's another major player involved, and that's our heart. And I learned that our heart has its own intrinsic nervous system. Sometimes it's called the heart brain, and it contains around 40,000 specialized neurons, and it communicates constantly with our brain. So heart to brain. And that part surprised me when I first learned it because more information actually travels from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. So when your heart and nervous system sense that, real or perceived. So it can be real or perceived. They send signals up to the brain saying something isn't safe. And once that happens, the brain's job becomes survival and not the logic. This is why knowing better doesn't always help. This is why reassurance, when people are giving you reassurance, it can bounce right off. And this is why you can say, I'm probably fine, and you still are feeling like you're probably not. Because the thing about your nervous system is it doesn't operate on facts, it operates on perceived safety. When you've lined yourself up and you have lived through stress and trauma, loss, and chronic anxiety, okay, or that real long term type of uncertainty, your system becomes very good at scanning for danger, especially when your body starts to send unfamiliar signals. And then when you add the hormones into the mix, especially during perimenopause, I learned this from a friend, and the system becomes even more sensitive, the estrogen starts to play a role in how our nervous system regulates stress. When it fluctuates, our tolerance for uncertainty often drops. So suddenly what happens is things that used to feel manageable start to feel even more overwhelming because your system gets louder. And then there's the cortisol part. Cortisol is that primary stress hormone. I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir, but for those of you that don't know, in short bursts, it's really helpful to have that cortisol. But when your stress is actually chronic, years of that pushing through and the grief or the caretaking, all the responsibility, when your cortisol stays elevated, so it's constantly in that elevated space, that is what can actually start to impact your digestion, your weight regulation, inflammation, sleep, pain perception, anxiety levels. The list goes on and on. So when the gut issues start to resurface, that's when the weight changes without any explanation. And that's when the pain starts showing up in new places. It is not random. It is literally the body saying, I've been holding a lot. And you guys, of course, I'm not even touching upon like what's in our genes and all of that kind of stuff. Just touching on like what I have been learning about when it comes to the self-regulation, the hormones and things like that. And then this is also why the things like fibromyalgia are so misunderstood because pain doesn't have to show up on a scan to be real. Pain can be that nervous system stuck in a really heightened space. And then what it does is it amplifies the sensation because it hasn't felt safe enough to fully exhale. So that doesn't make it imaginary, it makes it neurological. That's why panic attacks happen. We feel like we might be having a heart attack and it's generating all of this pain in all of these different places, but we're not seeing it on a scan. It's not showing up in the EKG. And then when your body starts to feel unsafe, it starts to look for meaning. And then that's where some of that spiraling happens because your mind starts to search and it starts to connect the dots and it starts to fill in the gaps. But here's the thing. The irony is it starts preparing for the worst, not because it wants to scare you, but because it wants to protect you. Again, this is all biology, and understanding all of that really has helped me make sense of what happened next because this is where I started to spiral just in the last several weeks. Because once the fear set in, it wasn't just mental anymore, it was becoming really physical. I started waking up in the middle of the night again, which I hadn't been doing. And I can only explain it as cortisol spikes because it is literally that sudden jolt in your body where your heart, you just literally wake up and your heart is racing. Your stomach drops and it's like, it can even be like stomach burning. And your system feels on high alert before your mind is even fully awake and processing it. So if you have felt that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the stomach pain comes back again. There's that tightness, there's the discomfort, that really deep sense of unease that lives in the gut. And knowing what I know now, I can see it so much better. Oh my gosh. It was all of this energy stuck in my body. And when all of that fear doesn't get processed, when emotions don't get to move through properly, they don't just disappear, they lodge themselves into our nervous system and they show up as the tension, the pain, the racing thoughts. This is why we wake up in the middle of the night. And I wasn't being dramatic. My body wasn't being dramatic. It was just overloaded. And the more I tried to think of a way out of it, the louder it got. Because once this whole nervous system is activated, again, logic just doesn't know how to calm it down. The body needs something different, maybe something slower, something safer. And then this is where I want to say it gets better for women because we know that, but no, it actually gets more complicated for us because when you're in this state, everyone has advice. Everyone has that opinion again. Everyone has a solution. And then instead of feeling supported, you can end up feeling more frustrated, more confused, and more disconnected from yourself than ever before. The overwhelm of information, the pressure to choose the, again, air quotes, the right path, and how easy it is to lose trust in your own body when too many voices are telling you what to do. And I'm in it, folks, because my career is all about helping women. So guess who are the ones that are in my social media? They're all the coaches, they're all the hormone specialists, they're all of the different, women's supporters, which is great. It is so great. But sometimes healing doesn't start with more answers. It actually starts with having a deeper relationship with yourself. And that is something I want to talk about because I don't want to give you more answers. This isn't about fixing yourself. But once you're in this activated place, when fear is already living in your body, that's when the certainty or the search for certainty starts to begin. And then that's when the noise gets really loud. So that's when we notice like that reticular brain. We've talked about that in the past. This is when all of a sudden we're seeing on our social media or, we're seeing maybe commercials or movies even where there's like experts or maybe you see articles coming up, podcast episodes talking about it. You're seeing reels about it. There's doctors, specialists, healers, different protocols. I mean, good God, there are so many things. And it all comes from a space. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I guess I should say I believe that a lot of it comes from a space of truly caring. Some of it comes from things that, I feel like it's where the money is, but that's a whole nother conversation. But here's the thing. There's lots of promises. There's lots of warnings and opinions, and everyone sounds super confident, right? Everyone has an answer, but somehow every single answer are all different. All different. So instead of clarity, you feel stuck again. You feel, so alone and frustrated because now it's just not about what's happening in your body. It becomes about making the right choice. What choice am I going to take? What if I take the wrong thing? What if I don't take something I should? What if I miss a sign? What if I'm overreacting? What if I don't react enough? And slowly something else starts to happen. You begin to doubt yourself. I mean, you guys do see the pattern, the loop we get ourselves in? We question our own instincts and we start to wonder if we're being irresponsible or if we're being naive or dramatic. And I don't know, as a woman, I feel like I have always been taught to be a very agreeable patient. I am so that person. I don't ask too many questions. I try not to be really difficult. I don't like to take too much space up. And yet we've heard of, again, I think I mentioned at the beginning that we've heard all these stories of women who didn't push hard enough who were told it was stress or anxiety or hormones until it wasn't. So we live in this impossible tension. And I'm not here to be all doom and gloom, I promise. But I guess I just am saying all of this to know that you are seen, to know that you are held in this space. And here's what I realized in the middle of all of this: more information wasn't helping me feel safer. In fact, it was doing the exact opposite. I found myself searching late at night. I was seeing all these conflicting opinions. I was actually getting, I'm not going to lie, I was getting a little resentful. And then I was also saving things just in case, just in case. I better save that. I was trying to be responsible while feeling so unsettled every single day. And then I would freak myself out because I'm like, oh my gosh, am I seeing all of this because it's God warning me? Is it like the signs that something's wrong? Because again, I'm going to go back to when that nervous system is activated, more input doesn't bring relief. It keeps the system scanning. We're just like scanning, scanning, and it reinforces the idea that safety is somewhere outside of us. And that's where the trust quietly starts to erode. Again, not because we're weak, but because we're overloaded. And at some point, I could feel that I wasn't actually listening to my body anymore. I could feel that. I was monitoring it and I was analyzing it and I was managing it. That is not the same thing as being inside of a relationship with yourself. So I knew that something had to shift. And I knew I had to get just more present. I had to get more curious because when all of my fear was running the show, it felt so, it just felt so noisy. So there is an important part of the story that I do want to share because I feel like I have gone off on all of these thoughts and ideas and just, what I've learned. But this was a turning point for me. And before I ever got the mammogram results, I ended up in the hospital. So just by the time this airs, it will probably have been about a couple of weeks. But I was having these chest pains, the kind you don't really want to brush off, even though every instinct in me wanted to. And what's telling is that it still took my son and my husband convincing me to go. That hesitation showed up again. That familiar shame, the voice that says, don't overreact, don't make a scene, don't be dramatic. But I went because when you see your own child look at you in the eyes and literally says to me, Mom, I don't want to go to bed tonight wondering if you're going to die in the middle of the night. That's when I was like, okay, let's go. But how sad that it took that because I fell back into my old ways, right? But anyways, they ran all of the tests and they checked my heart and they looked at enzymes. They were looking at like the liver, the gallbladder, kidneys. Everything came back normal. No heart issues, no immediate red flags. And then came the conclusion so many women recognize. It could be stress. Try Pepsid in case it's reflux. Make sure you follow up with your doctor. And so here I am again, and I'm like walking out holding two very different emotions at the same time. There was relief, real relief that nothing life-threatening was happening. So that was the real relief. But then there was this frustration because once again, I was sitting in the unknown. I have even had other women tell me they had hoped that something was wrong so they didn't feel crazy. And I've been there before too. But then, you guys, literally days later, my aunt passed away suddenly at the age of 64. She was literally in making breakfast with her family. She went to the restroom, and before we know it, we believe she had a massive heart attack. And let me tell you, that kind of loss doesn't just land in your mind, it lands in your where? It lands in your body. It adds weight to every single thing that we were already carrying. So a couple days later, mammogram results came in. They were clear. And you guys, I sobbed. Deep, full body sobbing. It was like there was just this relief washing through me in a way I didn't even realize I was holding back. And it was in that moment, not because everything was fixed, but because something had actually softened. And I knew I needed to record this episode because even with that relief, the feelings didn't just like disappear. They for sure eased, yes, for sure. But they also asked to be acknowledged. And in the days that followed that, through a lot of quiet conversations with women I trust, women I love, women I support, something became very clear to me that this isn't just my story. So many women are living this exact experience. The fear, the vigilance, the waiting, the shame around needing reassurance, the strength it takes to keep showing up while your body feels uncertain. So, this episode isn't coming from panic, it's really coming from honesty. Because even when things turn out okay, the body remembers what it was holding. And when we don't give ourselves space to process that gently, without judgment, it doesn't go away. It just shows up differently somewhere else or another time. So this isn't about, rushing to gratitude and moving on. It's about honoring what this experience asked of me. And maybe that's what it's asking of you too. The blood work came in. There are some things, I'm definitely going through late stages of perimenopause and moving into menopause. So I need to look at more things when it comes to the hormones. I need to really go back to regulating those emotions, paying attention to my health in a different way. So there's things that need to be addressed after seeing the blood work, but what feels most important for me to say today is that we are not meant to carry this alone, and we're also not meant to walk the same path. I do really believe that there are answers. I believe that there is healing. I believe there are ways forward. And I also believe that what brings peace and clarity or relief for one woman may look completely different for another one. We're designed differently. Our bodies are different. Our stories are different, and that matters. But we are all the same in such a beautiful way. So, what I hope more than anything is that we begin encouraging one another, not fixing it, not diagnosing, not comparing, but truly, truly encouraging each other. Telling the truth without shame. Letting ourselves be seen where we are instead of where we think we're supposed to be. And I gently want to say this part too. Please don't judge other women for what they're going through. You don't know what their body has carried. You don't know what their nervous system has learned through time. You don't know what season they're in. This is the journey. And every woman deserves respect as she moves through it. Sometimes the most healing thing isn't an answer or a solution. Sometimes it's peace in knowing that we are not alone. And yes, I'm going to continue to bring experts into the podcast because, again, I feel like there are so many beautiful things that we can be talking about, but let's talk about them. Let's be respectful of them and let's support each other on this walk. And we're going to keep learning what it means to live fully and honestly as women. And we're going to keep learning about tools and resources. They're going to keep coming. But for today, this wasn't about the solutions. It was about seeing one another. It was about really just holding that space and reminding you and reminding myself that we're in this together. I thought it was just really important. So if this episode met you in a tender place, I hope you feel a little less alone right now. And I'm going to say, let's take one more breath together. Let's take a nice big inhale, exhale, and let's just let that be enough for today. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing this space to hold the truth without the judgment. And I hope that this resonated with you. And if it did, would so love to get your feedback. Sharing our stories, again, it helps us to not feel alone. And if maybe there's somebody going through something really hard right now, maybe they've gotten news that they weren't expecting. Maybe they're still trying to find answers. Share this episode. That's the beauty of what we can do as women to help lift each other up and just to sit with each other. So until next time, my friends, keep rising, keep shining, and remember your best day is right here waiting for you. Have a great day, you guys.
Thanks for joining me here today. Your presence means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Head to the show notes and let's connect. Rise to Shine Co. is ready to support you in coaching, collaboration, life tips, or even a coffee chat. Until next time, keep shining, my friends.